Well, thank you everyone for coming. I'm really glad you're here, and my name is Dan Scoggin, and I'll be talking about serving young men and women today. And I have the envious spot right after lunch, so if anyone wants to take a nap, we're going to put some coffee back. But thank you very much for being here. And of course, we're glad to have a sponsor for this session. We want to thank our Renaissance sponsor, Padea Graphic Design. We teach our students that beauty matters, and our school's digital and print materials should reflect the same commitment to clear and elegant written and visual communication. Padea Graphic Design helps busy administrators craft compelling websites, annual reports, case for support documents, and more. Customizable academic planners used by more than 40 classical schools nationwide. Help students stay organized while reinforcing your commitment to wisdom and virtue by featuring weekly quotes from great authors like C.S. Lewis, Augustine, O'Connor. Schools can customize their planners with calendars, uniform codes, songs and prayers, and more. And you can go to padeagraphics.com. They also have a booth here. So thank you to them for sponsoring this. Let's see if we can get the clicker to go forward here. Maybe I'm too far away. Okay, well, this session is very close to my heart, this topic of teaching young men and women. And there's really a crisis, I think, in classical education because so much of the movement's K-8. And we prepare those K-8 students to thrive in high school. And so how do we get as many of our young men and women with hope, with accomplishment, all the way through senior graduation? And that's something that Great Hearts is really working hard on. It's not easy. We do lose 8th to 9th graders, and we're trying to keep as many of those hearts with our programs. So this is a work in progress for Great Hearts. I think Mac Esau's here, and a lot of our upper school heads are here, Amber Dyer. I see a lot of our prep school headmasters who really work on building very intentional culture, which of course is built around the heart of the teacher as rhetor to serve young men and women. And the classical tradition has so much to say about this. And Great Hearts originally started as an upper school. I came from the Claremont colleges as a basketball coach and teacher, and working with college students was really intellectually fun. But when I came to teach 8th graders poetry and 10th and 11th graders humane letters and get to know who these young men and women are, that was my conversion point 30 years ago. And my calling, and the calling of so many of our heads of school, is how to work with teenagers, how to work with young men and women to compel them to a life calling of heroism, to great-heartedness. And so this topic is very close and dear to my heart. And my wife and I, we've had daughters come through the program. I have 4 daughters, 2 of whom have graduated from Chandler Prep, and 2 of whom are still in the program. And so I have kind of bookends, kids about to be teenagers and young men and women who have gone through the program. So these dear souls are very close to my heart. So in this talk, go back a slide here. In this talk, I'm going to talk just a little bit about the data. What's the data saying today about this anxious generation? Just touch on a couple key slides. Some of this data will be familiar to you. I'm going to talk about nomenclature and stages. How should we define this age generation, this era in their lives? And then I'm going to offer a thesis that I don't think will be too controversial, but I just want to name a countercultural approach to working with young men and women. This concept of unique potential and natural inclinations, Quintilian, Aristotle, Cicero have a lot to say. The classical tradition has a lot to say about how you unlock the unique nature of adolescence at this age and teach to the individual, even though we're teaching to classes. I'm going to talk about greatness of soul and heroic calling, Aristotle's concept of magnanimity. There's a lot here. I'm going to kind of go quickly through some of these ideas as a framework for us to think about. Teacher authority, what should be the role of the teacher in terms of leader but also giver in the classroom, teacher as rhetor. But what should teacher authority look like in a classroom of 10th graders? It should look very different, of course, than working with 2nd and 3rd graders. Some common themes, but a different disposition. And then I really want to close with 5 relational keys. And at Great Hearts, these are the sort of the key techniques, if you will, where we use to unlock young men, young women, teacher trust with them. So I'm going to talk about proper praise, right competition, which is really important, how we create a competitive presence in the classroom, which draws students in instead of separating them, authenticity, kindness, and predictability. And then a couple practical considerations for you to think about at your school. So I hope I get through most of this. I'm gonna work to do it. So this is not a training. What this is a framework to do future trainings, to work with you or for you to work with your teachers and some vocabulary and concepts that you can do it. Because this, we could work on this for several days. How to talk about teacher relationality, how to hire for relational fit to serve young men and women. But these will be some concepts that might be directional and point us in the right direction. So this is the framework of how to work with young men and women, in my mind, from a classical perspective. Of course, these 3 core classical concepts and how they unite in the identity of a great teacher to work with young men and women. First of all, prudence. The teacher's good judgment, saying the right thing at the right time for the right reason. Just good judgment, good teacher judgment. And we, I'm not talking about Sophia, but that other concept of just practical wisdom in the classroom. When a teacher should push forward, when he or she should withdraw, when mercy and kindness are required, when a more authoritative, this is the time to move, when we call them out or when we come with grace. Teacher judgment every day. And it's there's a classical, whole rhetorical body of work that we can turn to for examples and ideas. And in fact, I'm going to give you one passage here in a bit for us to talk about. And then rhetorica, rhetoric. Sometimes we think of rhetoric as a negative. But rhetoric in the classical tradition is properly defined by Quintilian as the good man speaking well. It's persuasion. We need to persuade young men and women towards truth, goodness, and beauty. It's not false, it's persuasion for the best, so it's full honesty. And there's ways to be persuasive, to have personality and charisma and confidence to speak. Education, one of the meanings of education, root definitions from Latin, is to call students out of themselves. And this is what we have as classical schools that maybe some other schools don't have. We have this great Socratic concepts that are going to be front and center. Oh, so this depressing slide. You've probably seen this from Jonathan Haidt's work, The Anxious Generation, right? You've seen this slide in his book. But over the last, 18, 19 years, this is 2021, latest data, it needs to go out further. We know that young men and women don't spend time together the way they used to. Days of average time with friends during the day, around 160 minutes, and 23 is now down to 42, 43 minutes in this early part of the 2020s. What's that line in the middle? What does that line represent? The widespread adoption of the cell phone. So that's the cliff. That's the cliff. And so we struggle in our culture with friendship. And how does a young man or young woman find meaning and purpose and calling? How can he or she be heroic if they don't have the interactions and moments that are so important? So we as classical educators, how do we solve for that? And we have the opportunity through seminar, through educare, through the rhetorical tradition, through persuasion, and through the communities that we create to drive up the friendship index to more and more hours that are devoted to human beings looking each other in the eye and loving on one another through great things. Just the opposite trend line, just as friendship goes down, on the other hand, anxiety goes up. So the gray area is wide cell phone adoption from 2010 to 2015. The anxiety rate, percent of U.S. major anxiety has just shot through the roof. going up 139% since 2010. Of course, I'm in this category, and we're fine. Like, I don't even know, I don't even know what's going on. We're good. Yeah, we're just flatlined. So it's good to be old, right? You're happy when you're old. And then we have these data points. Twenge's book, John Paul Poppleton at Chandler Prep turned me on to this book. I read it over the summer. Really, really interesting. Some of the trend lines. 10th graders don't take risks as much as they used to. They're inside more, they're alone more, they're not out breaking legs, making bad decisions. We need to make a certain number of bad decisions so we can get practical wisdom. Rise in 12th graders not satisfied with themselves. 22% is doubled in the last 10 years, sad. Extreme ideology on the rise, especially extreme liberal doubling since 2012. Decline in 12th graders who expect work. This one, who expect work to be a central part of their life, 42%. So only 42% of 12th graders, graduates, expect work to be a central part of their life. Am I reading that right? And 12th graders who say it's likely they'll have children. This is dropping fast. So what this represents is you could say a failure to launch. Young men and women who don't have a calling, who don't have a heroic professional. What am I called to do? Who am I called to be? What's my life calling? What's my mission? This is mission gap. This is mission erosion. And it's most disconcerting, so we work in this context with young men and women. So I just want to say, I've used the term teenagers. It's in the slide that captures my talk here. And I've talked a lot with my friend Andrew Zorneman about this. He's one of my mentors. And, I'm 57. Please don't call me an old timer. So we shouldn't call teens, we shouldn't use that. It's pejorative, right? It's attaching an age to a human being. It's data pointing them instead of knowing them as Roger or Susan or their most human self. And so I don't like the term teenager. I think we should jettison it. So, well, what do? I think we should instead look for descriptors at our schools that are forward-looking. I went back to the Latin. There's, of course, the term adultus, which is the root of adult, and adolescence, which means growing up or progressions. I like words that are action-based, forward-looking, that are part of this grasping a calling. And so there's that classical idea of apprenticeship from the Latin verb apprehendere, meaning to take hold of, to grasp. And in the classical tradition, the young woman and young man grasps. It might be a trade or a profession or a higher calling to secondary or professional education, but they grasp something during those years of 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. They have enough sense of themselves and enough sense of their talents, and there's a calling, and they take something on. And hopefully they choose the right thing. For us, a lot of times, we'll just go to college. But we want something deeper, that they're seeing their talents and gifts innately and naturally seen by us and by them, that there's a correspondence of them choosing a path. So I like this idea of agency, of free graspers. So we look at these young men and women as like they're at a key point in their lives. It's not the only point they're going to make a decision about their future, but we see them in sort of this honored position of taking hold of a calling. And so at Great Hearts, in our high school classrooms, we address men and women as Mr. and Mrs., or Mr. and Miss. Not Mrs. yet, I hope. And so we call them by their last name. That doesn't mean we don't, at times, use their first name, but give them dignity. Give them respect. Look at them in the eye and see that they are an adult in becoming. They're an apprentice for the most heroic calling in their lives. So we should give them dignity. That doesn't mean we're easy on them or don't challenge them or pull them out of themselves if they're in a morass. So there are stages to the journey. An 11-year-old is so different than an 18-year-old. We think of the rhetorical stage, the last stage of the classical trivium. I know it talks about the disciplines, the developmental stages in forming children and young men and women. But I do think, I've thought a lot about like those middle school kids, 6th and 7th graders, maybe 8th graders, they are emerging into a kind of a pre-adulthood, and they need to be seen as such. So I often think of, kind of that first I am moment, like I'm distinct from my mom and dad. I'm some distinction from their family, which is natural to be expected. Emerging abstract thought. They begin to seek some independence, but often lack self-control. And so I think of the 4 classical virtues, right? There's courage, but still developing temperance. But they also just have this wonderful innate sense of joy and wonder still and we want to let them keep that childhood curiosity and wonder as long as we can. We don't want to quash that. In fact, we want to point them to great things when they go through that stage. And then, sophomoric is kind of a pejorative term. I don't really like it that much. So I just really look at these young men and women in that middle stage. They're bold, they can know, stand and speak. They love having autonomy, but sometimes they can't put the whole picture together in a cohesive sense of wisdom, but they love social interactions. Think of those 9th and 10th graders. They're looking for friendship, even more so than the students who are a little bit younger, more sort of adult friendship and increasing autonomous friendship. And then so I think of courage and justice, but still developing wisdom. And then those 16, 17, and 18-year-olds are really, if we're doing a good job by them and their mom and their parents are doing a good job by them, and they're really seeking who they should become, they start to have a calling. And it's not their final calling. I've had multiple callings in my life. The Lord's worked in my life across my 6 decades. But there's that initial calling of what they may want to do. And how do we get them to a place where they can start to make some decisions about the next chapter, but they still need a lot of support. They want confidence. That's a great idea. Let me hear more about that, to draw them out as they begin that thought process. So here is the basic thesis that I have, and I've chosen the title of the thesis is further up and further, and that's I think it's from book 15 of C.S. Lewis's The Last Teenagers. So if we go in with the sense of failure, using prejudices or public preconceptions of these years, of course we're bound to fail. We go in with hope. It's messy. Well, it's still messy. It's messy to serve a 3rd grader. It's messy in a different way. So we go in with confidence that these are going to be the best years as parents and working with our young men and women, but also in teaching them. And what we have that other schools don't have, this deep classical tradition in the books about what it means to be a human being. The philosophical, literary, poetic, and artistic traditions, right when that 15-year-old is wondering, of course, not for the first time, but maybe for the deepest time, who am I? What does it mean? I don't even know who I am. Who am I? Who am I? How am I different than my brother and sister? What does it mean to be a human being? What am I going to do with my life? The existential moment. We all know that's part of these years, and naturally so. Right at that moment, we give them the great conversation. We give them the great books. We give them friendship. We give them the great experiences. And not in a dogmatic way, but in a free and open way that they can join us in this moment. An 11th grader that's wondering what it means to be a human being and reads Plato and struggles through Plato, Plato's asking the same questions. 10th graders need to read Crime and Punishment. Raskolnikov's existential problems and suffering and pain and wondering, the 10th grade mind and heart, it's perfect. And a seminar well led at that time with love and care and conversation is perfect. A perfect time to meet the moment. Perfect way to meet the moment. Of course, we have to do this through trust, and that's how I'm going to get to these 5 relational keys about how we build trust in our schools. I'm going to get to this passage in a minute, but I want to be ahead of the game. Can you start passing that way with this, and maybe that way with this one? So in about 2 minutes, I'm going to get to that, 5 minutes or so. It's a passage from Quintilian. So the myth of relevance. By the way, have you heard this term 6-7 and you do something with your hands? Bazanson, you'd probably do that a lot. Yeah. Is it higher up? Yeah, I think it's higher. Yeah. My daughters were showing this. I did not know what the hell they're talking about. But how did my daughters get the 6-7 thing? But anyway, I guess it's from basketball or something. It's not? It's something more? It's from nowhere. It's from the existential sinkhole of TikTok. Okay, got it. Yeah, let's stay away from that. I don't have a slide on that. But so there's this myth, out there in working with young men and women. You notice I've stopped using the word teenagers. Is that we need to show that we are hip, so we're going to work into a lesson on Shakespeare. Something about the latest thing on TikTok or some type of dramatic other place or some recent movie or I don't know. I can't even come up with good examples. But this is false. We don't need to be relevant through, and actually we look like idiots with them, and we look stupid and we lose trust and credibility. So, and young teachers sometimes will play this game and it always fails. It may have 1 second of emotional rise and goodness, and then it's all downhill from there. So relevance, the definition, I looked something up in a dictionary, closely connected or appropriate to what is being done or considered. So this goes back to the unique opportunity. It's just do the work. Do the work. Do it with heart and love. Do the literature. Do the math. Do the basketball. Do the football. Do the speech and debate. And do it with a lot of intensity, but we need to talk about something. We need to talk about music together. We need to play music together. We need to act. So relevance is found through the thing at hand, especially during this idea of apprenticeship where young men and women want to grasp freely something that they love. So relevance is found through connection between student and teacher around what is true, lasting, and a profound respect for one another of what is being studied greater than the self. So, it might be a way when you talk to a teacher, when you're interviewing them or a young teacher, let's talk about relevance. What do we want to be relevant about or with? So, just two concepts before I get to that quintillion passage in a second, which I want you to read, and then we'll discuss it briefly. I love Quintilian. He was followed in the tradition of Cicero, the great Roman orator from Spain, lived in the 1st century A.D. He says, well, first of all, students are the curriculum. That may sound kind of odd. The curriculum's the curriculum. But a teacher of young men and women, I would say the same thing for those of us who teach elementary school students too, but especially young men and women, what makes you tick? What makes this student react this way versus that student? Johnny's motivated by this type of encouragement. If I do that with Susan, she's going to really shut down on me. What's going on with you at home? What do you love? What do you love outside of school? So I know there's only so much time that a teacher has, but we need to really study the natural inclinations of our students. And if you have 25 students in a classroom in 10th or 11th grade, there's 25 different natural inclinations. And over the course of the year, a great teacher will really understand the unique nature of them. We don't see them as a group. We see each of them as distinct individuals. So Quintilian, 2,000 years ago, said that natural ability on this view becomes even stronger when supplemented with attention, the attention of the teacher, to notice the natural inclinations. Conversely, the student who is directed away from his inclinations never achieves real competency and even grows weaker in the areas of his inborn talent due to neglect. Cicero, his teacher. We are well aware that impressive students of very different types can and do emerge from the same classroom as long as the teacher adjusts instruction to the natural inclinations of each. So there's differentiated instruction, of course. Most teachers are going to have that. I think they're talking about something a little bit different here. I think they're talking about how to encourage, how to persuade. Remember, they're talking about the rhetorical tradition, how to persuade young men and women in different ways to meet the moment. So you're often talking to the class as a whole, but you might modulate how you describe where we're going in different ways, knowing how students are reacting, and then those individual encouragements and admonitions need to be very much structured to the unique natural inclination of the student. So I could say a lot about this slide. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but at a classical school, we understand there's unique potential and natural inclinations of each young man and woman, and if we don't, we're not really meeting the moment of their calling, their unique potential and calling. But we teach them to think clearly. So fostering intellectual virtue will help them be more aware of their own inclinations, to kind of listen to their heart, listen to their mind, see their own talents. So intellectual virtue is great academically, but it's also great in the sense of self-identification and the examined life, which is so important to the classical tradition. Moral virtues, which begin in the earliest days of their life, and those moral habits are good because if they're not temperate, they're not going to have the space. They're going to be controlled by their passions, which I know so many of us are afraid of young men and women in our culture, teenagers, because they're so passionate. So temperance, those kindergarten and first grade teachers cultivating moral habits allows us to do this work later. So thank you, kindergarten and first grade teachers, by laying the ground rails of moral virtue. I've already talked about the great conversation and that there is objective truth and reality. They are not self-created. They are not just their own identity, an island unto themselves. They are part of something much greater than themselves. So believing that objective truth can be found, it's hard in many cases, but it can be found and sought, and not making them cynics or relativists will help them meet the moment, right? Because I'm searching, but there's something to search for in my heart, in my mind, in the tradition. Great teaching, which is really the point of this talk, and the identity of the teacher allows unique potential to be unlocked, and then a reverence for greatness and heroism, which I'm going to talk about. This slide just kind of puts it all together. Shannon was helping me design these slides, and Shannon, we forgot to put this underneath. This is supposed to be under the triangle. My bad. But for young men and women, we should pause in the tradition of literature, in the tradition of the arts, in the tradition of history, to look at those moments when we see protagonists accepting a heroic calling. And what's so interesting about a heroic calling, I think of Mary from the Gospels. She was 15, 14. That's what the tradition says, right? So she's in the age group we're talking about. Gabriel comes to her, and she accepts the commission. Externally, Gabriel says, the Lord is with you. She accepts the commission. But at that moment, too, what's so beautiful about Mary, this heroic young woman, her soul is magnified. She already possesses this sense of greatness and spirit. It's humble, but she accepts it because she sees it in her. And that's what we want to happen. I mean, I don't think they're all going to be the mother of God. That's awesome. but in this story, it's so amazing, this correspondence where we want John, we want that 17-year-old to see a correspondence between the external reality of the world, of truth and reality, and something that's real in them, that's calling them to solve and heroically meet the moment, to see a path in their lives. And all these heroes, these are just a couple of examples, a lot of them from Scripture, but also from the classical tradition, where these heroes, there's something in them, and often they're anxious and nervous. You know, Abraham is kind of a reluctant hero. Moses is a reluctant hero, but they rise to meet the challenge. So it's okay to be a reluctant hero, but we keep pressing forward. So these are stories that we want our young men and women to think about. And there's so many, I mean, we could pride and there's just all the literature and philosophy has these heroic calling moments. So just a couple more slides, and then I'm going to have you take a moment to read that quintillion. Aristotle's magnanimity, and this really, I want you to think of the teacher when I read this passage. How would a teacher help this sense of magnanimity take place in a classroom, in a school culture? Aristotle's magnanimity, megalosykia, or greatness of soul, is a virtue of having a correct and high estimation of one's own worth. Being worthy of great things and acting accordingly, situated between the extremes of vanity and false humility. The magnanimous person deserves honor and claims it appropriately, focusing on noble deeds and beautiful actions, bearing trouble calmly and showing a lofty, generous spirit, but they are not arrogant, as they understand true worth comes from virtue, not just external praise. So this is what the teacher is trying to achieve in the classroom. Yes, you have greatness, but don't be overly proud. But don't be overly humble, because you have something unique to do in the world. And so this Aristotelian sense of greatness of soul, I think this is what we're trying to create. And when I go into some of the 5 keys to relevance with young men and women, which I'm going to close with in a bit, this is the Aristotelian mean that we want to achieve, greatness of soul, and the teacher's role in not overestimating but not underestimating as the young man or woman comes through the program. So some of it has to do with how we teach. Teacher nobility. The teacher is noble because you have a sense of calling to be a teacher. So we model heroic calling, right? By being a great teacher and wanting to do this work authentically in the classroom. And so what that means is we're not dogmatic. Dogmatism does not, a dogmatic classroom does not work with 15-year-olds. You might get short-term compliance, but you get underlying resentment and the whole thing erodes quickly. Do it because I tell you. On the other hand, the other extreme is a permissiveness. Well, you're adults now. Let's roll out the basketball. Do what you want. What would you like to do today? Or what do we want to do today in seminar? Should we do math today? What do you guys? No, let's go outside. It's that middle place, the authoritative prudential approach, which I've been talking about. Prudentia combined with rhetorica and combined with educare. But you model nobility and heroic calling. You model it for them, and then you have them do it. This is the apprenticeship that takes place in great classrooms, where you model the quest, the Socratic moment, most of all. And we know from Vegan Gorian's giving like 6 workshops here. He's such a rock star here at the Great Hearts Symposium. But we know the second sentence, instead a compelling vision of the goodness of goodness itself needs to be presented in a way that is attractive and stirs the imagination. So to serve young men and women, we need to be attractive. And some of that means actually combing your hair, so that 10th grade teacher, maybe he's 24, who sleeps in his car in the parking lot of your school, he needs to get an apartment and shower and comb his hair and look the real deal as best as he can. And maybe you need to help him buy a better pair of shoes. But I'm talking more, remember that teacher who slept in I'm talking more about the sense of you need to be attractive in your personality, winsome. Like you really want to be there. And this is the most important, talking about Pride and Prejudice today is the most important thing I'm going to do in my life. This is awesome. I'm so glad to be here. That's attractive when you're passionate about doing it. So a couple quotes here. Teacher is rhetoric, the good man speaking well, the good woman speaking well. Aristotle, let rhetoric be the power of observing in each instance the possible means of persuasion. Think of phronesis. Think of good judgment. The teacher's tongue is the most powerful tool in education. The teacher's words and how he or she praises, disparages at times, and is quiet a lot. Quintilian, rhetoric is available only to a person who's just and good. You can only give what you got, right? If your heart's empty, you can't do this work. And so we know that the teacher needs to love the work, and we have hard days, long days, but you can only give what you have. Quintilian, there are 3 ways in which a speaker establishes credibility: good sense, virtue, or excellence, and good intentions. So as we think about our lesson plans in our classes, what's our intention towards the students? To punish them? To prove our superiority to them? What's our intention? What's our sense? And then lastly, the good man remembers his good deeds. This is the teacher, not the student. He can lead others out of their order of remembrance. He sees the good deeds of others, and precisely because he does for himself. This is not self-centered because the good extends to all. So we as teachers need to be confident that we know a lot, we love this tradition, and we're here because we want to be, because we have a heroic calling to be here. And that's attractive, and then we give students the space through this apprenticeship to come on alongside the work. So what I want you to do, instead of just babbling at you for extended periods of time, is I want you to take just 2 minutes to read that passage. And hopefully, if there's not enough, I have it here. It'll be 2 slides. But read that passage, and I just want to ask you what stands out for you, given what I've said. So if you didn't get a passage, I'll click forward here in just a second to the second half of what was provided. Okay. What stands out for you? What are a couple things? Just raise your hand if something that stands out for you from the passage about the identity of a teacher. Yes?
It's not reactive. It's intentional. So instead of being like reactive in an emotional way, it's saying like choose in that moment what is most beneficial to the student rather than your own emotions.
Yeah. Well said. Did you hear what she said? Yeah. Can you stand up and say that?
I said it's about not being reactive, like being intentional and not letting your own emotions or your own insecurity come out in the choices that you make, but you're looking at it through the lens of the student and what's the right response to the right thing.
Perfect. Well said. Thank you. Other thoughts that stood out for you? Yes, please.
How we want them to show up, how it will benefit them in later on in life.
The job description, so HR will just paste this onto. But it's the voice of the teacher that you paste this onto. But it's the voice of the teacher that you want to be there and you want them to hear your voice. You're constantly modeling, as she said. But you just love the kids. And you're always giving them something to take away. So we could spend more time on this, but I want to go through these 5 relational keys. So now this is just a framework. I mean, we could do, I think at the Great Heart Schools we need to do like 2 or 3 hour separate trainings on each of these so we can do modeling and kind of role playing. But proper praise. Young men and women need to be praised the right way. And the 2 extremes, if we flatter and give them sugary praise, it's just not going to be authentic. You're going to be, this is BS. He or she's not really seeing me. How do we see the unique identity of that young man or woman and praise them properly? So praise, now there's sometimes you're praising a class, hey, you all did a really good job on that essay, and here's A, B, and C, why? Or that performance is really good, and here's why. But the most powerful thing you can do with a 15-year-old boy is look him in the eye and say, during that conversation, that seminar we had, when you said this, it moved the whole class forward. And that will fill his bucket for weeks and weeks and weeks, especially a student that you know is struggling. Or that when you solve that math problem that different way, Susan, I keep using Susan, I had not seen that before. And man, I want you to show that to the class tomorrow. Let's do it. Can you show it to the class right now how you solve that? Or you are leading in a specific way. I mean, just your emotional strength and presence during this difficult thing in literature has really held the class together. But specific praise is gold. It's gold. General flattery is weak. I mean, so we want to narrate the positive. There's Plutarch's essay, which is really good. We've read that with some of our schools. How to Tell a Friend from a Flatterer. Plutarch's essay. It's not that long. I think it's like maybe 10 or 15 pages. You can do it as a faculty workshop at your school, and it's a great way to talk about proper praise and model it. And get your teachers together, kind of trying that out in groups or two on two. Quintilian talks about this. And excessive criticism, you can lose the heart. Scripture talks about this. You can lose the heart of a young person by being too critical. So sometimes we have to hold our tongue and pick our battles and find a time to proper praise instead of criticize. Now, there are times, direct corrections required, and sometimes a kick in the ass is important, always in private, right? So there's times for that, HR, not a literal kick in the ass. I'm speaking metaphorically. Now this is something that I've been thinking a lot about this. This is the second of the 5 tools or the 5 connection points, is right competition in the classroom. We want excellence. This fits with proper praise versus flattery, but we want a standard of excellence in the classroom. Aristotle talks about that the young, they are eager for honor, but especially eager for victory. They live, for the most part, in a state of hope. They want to show their mettle, and we need to give them competitive places to do that. They have greatness of soul, for they have not been beaten down by life or experienced need. I've been beaten down. And greatness of soul means considering oneself worthy of great things. It is a characteristic of the person with high hopes. The young long to win in real things. They want to try out their talents. And so I know in classical schools, we want to create this very comforting and nurturing, safe environment. And we could actually, if you create the right competitive environment, the students are going to feel safe. But they're going to risk, and they're going to push, and they want to win by standing out with great comments and are honored rightly and are looked up to by their peers by saying great things, intellectually valid things, prudent things, on the basketball court, excelling. The other students rise to the challenge if the coach creates the right culture. Maybe you've read this book from 1937, Homo Ludens, by Johann Huizinga. He wrote that the competitive instinct is not in the first place a desire for power or a will to dominate. We have a competitive spirit in us. Competing for noble things is moral. Competing for noble things is moral. It's not a desire for power or will to dominate. The primary thing is a desire to excel others, to be first and be honored for that. So I agree with Aristotle on that. We want to pursue greatness, and we want to create conditions in our school. So I know sometimes, I remember this teacher, Mike Sullivan. He's a teacher at Veritas Prep. He's retired now. He would have the students declaim Latin, and they would stand up and were able to sit down when they nailed the proper translation. And you didn't want to be the last one standing. Now, it wasn't harsh, oh, you're the last one. You're a failure. No, it's the next time when he did it 2 days later, you wanted to get down by doing your work, right? And so there's the proper conditions and a great praise. John, Susan, that was the most incredible seminar that you helped us have today. And to praise properly in front of the group will then raise the bar for others. So they need to trust you. It needs to be a nurturing culture to allow that to happen, but we want a competitive spirit on the court and in the classroom. The difference between wanting to excel others and wanting to dominate others gets elided in egalitarian culture. We don't want egalitarian culture. We want free access for all and love all of our students, but we want excellence. And how do we do that in our schools? And it means a lot to young men and women that this is a real place. This is a place that honors properly. The contest for honor, according to Matthew Crawford, gives rise to deference and trust among players and a standard of excellence beyond the self. I've seen in a lot of Great Hearts classrooms this done really well, where you're still pursuing. And then you're encouraging the students that are losing heart. You're encouraging them around the edges so they can, frankly, get in the game. Authenticity, just two more after this, and then I'll close up with a couple final thoughts. Authenticity, that's maybe a term that's overused in our culture, but I think it's the right term. I thought about if I could find another word for it. But that you actually, as a teacher, as rhetor, believe that this lesson's really important. And you believe that this work is the most important thing you can do. If you're burnt out, a 15-year-old, a 17-year-old can snick that out in a minute, that you don't want to be here. So authenticity is just correspondence between your outward actions and your inner heart. And so if you don't sleep well and you're miserable and have a cold, that's your problem. You need to get ready to be truly authentic by having that extra cup of coffee and remembering why you're here and putting on your own heroic calling so you can meet their calling. So authenticity just really matters. And there's a lot of I've kind of read some of the research on this of what authenticity is, but there's a lot of research that authenticity actually takes discipline issues often out of the classroom. A teacher who can stand and be present and be authentic drives down discipline issues, drives down student loss of time, drives up learning. Kindness. I have a lot to say about kindness. We say at Great Hearts this old phrase, relentless goodwill. Relentless goodwill. It's not flattery. It's not fake. Sometimes relentless goodwill is toughness, resolution, resilience, but relentless goodwill to the young men and women. I want to be here with you. I feel called to serve you. Ready to do the good. And there's that student from hell that you have resentments for. There's those 4 young men, those 4 8th graders in the back of the class that I've been dreaming bad dreams about. The student from hell. We've all had the student or students from hell. They're not from hell. They have a story. They have natural inclinations. They have a background. We need to revise that story in our own hearts and minds to meet the moment, right? Standard of excellence, we think about all the young men and women and their rights to learn. But kindness takes the place of other things. Like, I've apologized to students before as a class. I did not do a very good job with that lesson, and here's why. And I wouldn't do that with third graders, but to do it with 11th graders at the right time, like, wow, because they know it. That lesson did not go well, and that's my fault. Or, I corrected you the wrong way. And after class to apologize. Now, this is where teacher judgment comes into place. You need to apologize at the right time in the right way. Sometimes that can actually backfire if you're not authentic about apologizing. You need to apologize for a specific thing, right? Just like you praise for specific things. Humor is so important as long as it's not caustic, to use that term from the keynote. Cynicism doesn't work. Mocking individual students don't work. But laughing when something happens in the class, it's like an elixir of goodwill. So we love humor in the classroom. It's so important. And the power of courtesy. You know, just greeting the students at the front door of the classroom with goodwill, looking them in the eye and actually smiling. Once again, it's about being attractive and wanting to be there. And I already talked about some of the positive imaging. I often tell our new teachers at Great Hearts during that 6 Loves talk that I give about, you need to really take care of yourself, especially young teachers. Look out for them getting sleep and actually eating, right, once in a while, and taking care of themselves, because you can only give what you have. And then to close the 5, and we can train for all of these, routines, clear expectations that 18-year-olds want structure in the classroom. They want to know what the rules of engagement are. So predictability is good. Don't just roll the basketball out, but predictability is super important in the classroom. So we often think, well, classroom management stops at high school. No, it looks different, but classroom management comes even more important as we create that structure. Predictability fosters risk-taking. Remember that problem with risk-taking during the generation slide that I started the talk with? We want to create a predictable environment in which learning and journey and competition can take place. A couple other things, and then I'll just, maybe we have a minute for questions. There's so many things that take place in a good classical high school, a good classical middle school and high school. Rites of passage, blazer ceremonies, thresholds. Remember that heroic calling. There's moments in the journey that have to take place. So I know a lot of our schools, they're given more freedom. We need to give freedom. Senior lounges, retreats, senior trips, honorings, walks, pinning ceremonies, all these rites of passage moments, just to give that sense of calling an epic moment. Public praise of excellence. I'm a big believer in giving awards, real awards, specific awards for meaningful things to high school students. It's not egalitarian culture. It's a culture of common excellence. Mature friendship accelerators. We need to give space for 15, 16, 17-year-olds to have friendships without us there. How do we create the best conditions for that? I have a lot of thoughts about that on retreats and how to create the campus to let that happen. Trust but verify that the culture is going well. Athletics. We have to have great athletic programs or opportunities there, I would argue, because it creates that competitive excellence, seminars. And just do stuff together, build stuff together, do quirky things. You know, build a stage together, build a catapult together in 11th grade. Man, the young men love that. And I know there's a lot of bleeding fingers from the hammers, but it was really good for us. And then finally, tools. Oh, best teachers to middle school. We lose the battle in middle school. I mean, that's a whole nother talk, a whole nother 2-day seminar about middle school. But we lose the war there, right? Because our best teachers want to teach 11th grade math and 11th grade seminar, right? They all want to go all the way up. I'm a college professor. I want to teach 12th grade. I'll tolerate working here so I can teach 12th grade. No, middle school. We need to put our best relational teachers there, because if we can get their hearts and minds there and convert them there, we have the best conditions to keep them through 9th and 10th grade. There's ways to hire for relationality. There are. They're just questions. You know it too. When you're sitting across from him or her during that interview, start to pretend you're the student. and put them in a situation, and then you got to model teach. They have to model teach, right? With 10th graders and 9th graders and 11th graders. And tell the 9th and 10th graders to be difficult. Coach them to create moments. I'm not saying like blow it up, but you can create conditions to test for it. And then you can train for this rhetorical skill and relationality. And so Great Hearts, I think, needs to do more of this with our teachers on how to train for proper praise, train for authenticity, train for the right competitive tone in classrooms. And then there's been a couple workshops that have talked about parent re-onboarding for middle school. And then I haven't solved this issue. I'm hoping Great Hearts can, but personality assessments for high school kids, like, I didn't know I was an introvert till much later. Now I can do a talk like this because I kind of get geared up for it. But knowing who you are, and there's psychology can offer meaningful things, and I think there's a place for that at the right time to work through some assessments with our high school kids to give them better self-understanding in addition to a great classical school. I have a lot to say about young men, but I'm not going to do that right now. I can't go back. We young men are way behind. The future of the world is women. In 40 years, there's going to be like 6 of men at this conference. I mean, it's true. I mean, there's so much to say. We do not know how to relate to young men. It used to be the opposite, like we need to reach our young women. Actually, women are winning. More of our teachers are women, which is awesome. But women are ahead intellectually. They're ahead of temperance. They're ahead in disposition. There's a crisis of masculinity in our culture, and our boys are lost. And there's a lot of research on this. That's a whole nother workshop. But I think there needs to be. You need to work on how 6th through 8th through 12th grade teachers work with young men. That's a whole other different seminar that's beyond the scope here, but there's a lot of thoughts on that. I think we have to end at, we could do 2 questions. Or insults, or this is stupid, I don't know, but I want to make sure you get to your next session. Yes, sir.
So I have a question about how do you balance, throughout you were talking about non-dogmatism, but I think it's pretty safe being here that there is a dogma behind Great Hearts of, it is a kind of Aristotelian Thomistic frame of thinking.
Yeah.
We're not framing them towards being relativists, towards being utilitarians. So how do you balance the idea of, where there is an objective truth, Great Hearts has taken something of a stance on that,
Yeah.
and yet being non-dogmatic?
Yeah. Well, we do believe in objective truth, but we seek it together in classrooms, and there can be very natural disagreement on what is justice in this particular instance, what is faithfulness in this particular instance. So we love that free debate and discussion as long as it's grounded in the text and a belief that truth can be found and held. So, but good question. I think I need to let you go because other groups are going to get mad at me, but I'm here if you have any questions, just come on up. But thank you very much.